Hi, time for the edition of Simply State. In this edition, we'll be talking about a few recent events and then kind of tying into the context of the larger show, The Thought Project, just so you know, that I completed last year here on YouTube on the channel at Deborah Casey, which I hope you will actually subscribe to. I think the big thing to note is that the weekend there was news that the U.S. government had actually seized some weapons that came into the country from Iran. There were about four of them. There's also contrasting supporting evidence and information that there were other weapons seized actually overseas that were from Iran that were supposed to be coming to the U.S. off the Somali coast. And I had to look at the two different reports and thought, is this just like changing it around as not to scare U.S. citizens? Like, because there's clearly this breaking news, like on Saturday, that the weapons came in, were found, taken out, as if the rest of us didn't already know that there was a problem with both Russia and Iran and China trying to bring nuclear weapons into the U.S. But that's what happened. And it was stopped, obviously, and caught, so that's good. As far as weapons off the Somali coast, I'm still not convinced that it isn't actually just a story that was put together to make everyone feel better to say those weapons never actually came to the U.S., but were actually off the Somali coast instead. Or so just two different sets that were found. Either way, the number each time was four, and they were Iranian, so I'm kind of questioning the story itself. Anyways, in context to the fact that today the U.S. actually ended up sending a number of actual specialized aircraft to the Middle East to fight Russia. And you would have to go back to my full show that I put together to understand all of that. But essentially what that means is that due to Russian interference in the Middle East, the conflicts in Ukraine and Israel, the U.S. has officially decided to get more Air Force involved at a heavier level, which means essentially that while it hasn't been declared, the U.S. is pretty much at war and going through operations, if you haven't already picked that up from what's been going on with the Houthis from Iran. At the same time, all of this, a very strange story comes to my mind, which always bothered me. It was very weird. At the time, seemed harmless. I think it's really not. It's a good story to release now. As you remember, of course, I had the issues with Patricia Kendrick, who started the fake agency out in Hollywood. And of course, you have, Buffalo Bill, who created Beyonce and Taylor Swift and J-Lo, and then knocked people like Janet Jackson, who were legitimate American performers, almost entirely out of the music industry of the U.S. Noting at the same time that there are tons and tons of independent performers that you can pursue who were not put in place by the Russian Mafia and who actually do sing and perform. So I hope you'll continue to seek those out in your daily lives. It's fairly obvious that the U.S. citizenship and most people do not actually consume the Grammys, Academy Awards, the SAG Awards, or even the Golden Globes really anymore. By the way, an old friend of mine posted a meme on Facebook today that showed a man winning at the Grammys big time, and the joke was that it was like Santera or somebody like that, Carlos Santera, and it was actually Omar Gaddafi. Like, it's just, I'm like, that's so right. Like, somebody really got it right with a meme for once as to what's really going on with some of these shows, because the mafias have taken them over and legitimate performers just aren't at them. I mean, look at my life. Like, I could literally sing, perform, play some instruments, I could write my own music. But I don't do anything in the industry because it's been taken over by mafias from Russia and Iran and the Chinese CCP here in the U.S., which is why nobody bothers them anymore. And it's not even funny to try to call them leftists. Now I'm going to tell you another story which is kind of weird, and I myself am still wrapping my head around it, because I mistakenly told someone last week, I said, that's Zac Efron. He actually seems like a decent Hollywood actor. And then I remembered that story I'd sort of replayed for all of you in the Thought Project, just so you know, which is I used to go with another friend of mine who's also rather buxom in DC. We go to Gold Cup and all these events. We have these really cute pictures on Facebook. People love them. And she's a teacher. She's still a teacher. And, a pretty woman, pretty model. She actually does some modeling online. Gets paid a little bit for it, but her main profession is as a teacher. And she and I had literally gone out. She really took on Kendrick and his now current wife, who pretends to be a model and is just simply not. That woman also works with Buffalo Bill and was so crazy. She was attacking the Department of Justice at the time and demanding drugs. And she was actually waging physical attacks on them, and probably still does, because the agency is actually a Russian-run agency. Where it gets confusing is that I was dealing with being trafficked at the time. Buffalo Bill came to me and got angry, and he said that she was angry, his mistress, now current wife. I don't even know if they're legally married in California, but whatever. Kendrick's current wife. said she was angry about us doing the Gold Cup and that she wanted to be able to come to it. And then the federal government had to reorganize because they really didn't want trash Russian Mafia at Gold Cup, right? Which is the horse race that goes on Virginia twice a year. Spring Gold Cup being the really big one. That'll be coming up in a few months. So, of course, I miss it. And I'm pretty sure it's nowhere near as much fun now post-pandemic. But anyways, so to loop rock around, they questioned me pretty heavily about it. I knew I could report it, but nobody really caught the whole loop around on that. A few years later, my friend that I had been going out modeling with, that this, now current wife had targeted too, because she was actually angry about the other woman for modeling with me. So these people who are supposed to be Hollywood celebrities and like world famous celebrity models that are really, really exceptional are competitive with me and another woman who's a teacher? Huh? And we're not skinny minis because so many people liked our pictures and we were so popular in the DC area, which is a very international city. Wow. Kind of makes you realize that the Hollywood, mystique really isn't so good, and that the photoshopping must be really, really good. And the whole covering up that they're all just mafia and a lot of them aren't very attractive, that they're all into do drugs and run kids, makes it even more obvious, doesn't it? So here's the thing that gets really creepy. Is a few years later, she comes back to me and tells me that Zac Efron is somehow caught up with her. She's dating a guy. She's about a trip with Zac Efron, and he keeps going on and on about her boobs and how great they are. She's like totally whippersnapped. I'm like, this is so weird. My friend is acting really crazy, and she can't stop talking about Zac Efron being nice to her and telling her how great her boobs are. Okay, here's the problem. He wasn't. He ended up signing with the Russian Mafia intel company later, or actually even around that time. I found out eventually, and he had taken a bunch of pictures of her and stolen them to use for their fake-out modeling agency, so that other women who were actually Russian or Chinese, Iranian, that didn't have good bodies in their plus size division, because she's like a 6 foot tall woman, was very buxom and really pretty, deserves some world famous acclaim actually, and deserves to be able to sell, her portfolio online, frankly, as opposed to these other people. But I think you get the point, right? Like, they stole her image. That's why he made a point of getting to know her, and then he sold when he went and took his contract at the Russian intelligence agency. So that's what's been going on. And that's also happened to me a number of times. Happened to me for a really long time with the trafficking. It's been horrible. So they trafficked her. They saw some pictures of her with me. They had been bothering me. I did my best to warn her, but she really didn't even pick up on that. Like, nobody thought he was that kind of guy. And nobody really even figured out probably until 2019 what he'd done. Yeah, so even like Mr. Nice Guy, Zac Efron. Yeah. So that's it for today's edition of Simply Stated, darling. And, the world still turns. But the rest of us are really over it.